The police told him the mountain was dangerous. Now he finally understands why. A grieving veteran and his loyal German shepherd built a winter shelter beneath a fallen oak just outside Denver. But when Echo kept growling at the frozen ground, Jack dug deeper and uncovered a century-old secret someone would kill to protect. What he found terrified the richest family in Colorado and made them desperate enough to hunt him through the snow. Before we jump into this unbelievable, true-inspired story, tell us, where are you watching from? Drop your city, state, or country in the comments below. We love seeing this community come together from all across the world. Winter pressed down on Denver like a cold hand closing slowly around a beating heart. Snow blanketed rooftops and sidewalks in a quiet white suffocation, muting every color and every sound. Wind rattled loose shutters and whistled through narrow alleys like the city itself exhaling in exhaustion. Beneath that sky of iron clouds walked a worn-out man who no longer felt he belonged to the world he moved through. Jack Turner trudged along the icy pavement with the posture of someone who had carried too much weight for too many years. At 68, his once broad shoulders had begun to slope through a lifetime of discipline still showed in the firm lines of his jaw and the squared shape of his stance. His face was weathered, creased with the memories of war, deep grooves framing his mouth and marking the corners of eyes that had seen more grief than any man should. His hair, once a proud dark brown, had faded into a rough mix of silver and charcoal, cropped short in a habit he couldn't break since the army. A pale scar cut through his beard stubble along the left side of his chin, a mark from a moment he wasn't sure he remembered anymore. Too many firefights, too many explosions, too many nights wondering why he survived when others didn't. Beside him walked Echo, his loyal German shepherd, 7 years old, strength and intelligence in every movement. Echo's fur was a blend of black and warm tan, thickened by the winter cold, and his ears remained constantly alert, as if every falling snowflake could pose a threat. His dark eyes flicked constantly from Jack to the world around them, as though he knew he was the last protector of the man he adored. Echo had served as Jack's therapy dog after the war, never trained for combat, but gifted in the quiet ways of healing, sensing every tremor beneath Jack's skin before it surfaced. Jack's boots crunched through the snow as he stopped outside a modest brick house at the edge of the neighborhood. The curtains were drawn. The yard was overgrown, wilted by winter. A wind chime hung over the porch but didn't ring, it was frozen stiff. This was the house where his life had ended months ago, though the body that had lived with him had only died weeks earlier. Her name was Margaret Turner Maggie, to anyone who knew her as well as Jack did. She had been his anchor, his softness, his home. She was small and graceful, with gentle hazel eyes and a laugh that always surprised people with its brightness. Maggie had met Jack when he was a soldier, returning from Iraq for the first time broken-haunted, convinced that nothing in the world was left worth staying alive for. She healed his darkest corners, sewed hope back into the holes inside him. But cancer was a battlefield he could not defend her from. He watched that illness strip her strength, take her smile, and finally steal her breath in their living room one gray Tuesday afternoon. After the funeral, neighbors had come, kind words, casseroles, pity. They meant well, but they didn't understand. Jack smiled and nodded and said the right things, then returned to the silence of a house that no longer welcomed him. Every object inside still looked like Maggie, her scarf draped over the chair, her favorite teacup on the counter, her knitting basket waiting in the corner. The home wasn't empty. It was crammed full of the ache of absence. Every memory in that space was a reminder of what he lost. And grief, Jack realized, was not a wound. It was a slow bleed that never seemed to clot. Echo nudged Jack's hand gently with his nose, sensing the familiar tension in his chest. Jack looked down, exhaled, and stroked the dog's fur. "I know, buddy," he whispered. "I know. We can't stay." He was right. Staying here had been slowly killing him. Inside the house, cardboard boxes were scattered across the floor, like debris from a life being dismantled. Clothes, kitchenware, old photographs, medals he once hid in drawers packed away with no destination. But on the kitchen table, separated from everything else, lay a single leather-bound journal, its edges curled and cracked from time. It belonged to his father, Henry Turner, a blacksmith with arms like steel and a voice that rumbled like distant thunder. Henry had died 15 years ago, but Jack still remembered the scent of iron and burning coal that lingered on his clothes. Henry's journal was mostly filled with notes about forging techniques, drawn steel riveting patterns, temperature markings. Yet scattered among them were sketches of mountains and crude maps of forest land north of Denver, accompanied by cryptic lines such as "Boundaries forgotten are not boundaries lost." Turner Land remains Turner Land, and the most haunting one, true north leads home. Jack had never understood what his father meant. But now, as the world inside him shattered, and he had nothing left tying him to civilization, those words felt like a whisper from beyond the grave. A direction. A mission. He opened a drawer and found Maggie's wedding ring. He had taken it off her hand before the burial, because he couldn't bear to let the earth have it. He tucked it into the journal like a promise, closed the cover, and held it against his chest. He hesitated only a moment, taking one last look at the walls still lined with their life together. Then he turned his back to it all. He loaded a rucksack with bare essentials, a few cans of food, a steel pot clothes matches the journal, and slung it over his aching shoulders. Echo sat patiently at the door tail, thumping, as if he had been waiting for this moment. Jack rubbed the dog's head, murmuring, "It's just you and me now." The walk out of Denver felt like walking through every goodbye he had never wanted to say. The city grew quieter behind him. Its towering buildings faded behind swirling curtains of snow. He trudged upward into the foothills toward the Rocky Mountains, toward the wild, cold unknown. Patience and sorrow were his only guides. Jack wasn't running from life. He was searching for something, though he did not yet know what. Maybe peace, maybe freedom, maybe a reason to believe that the world still held some hidden good he hadn't yet uncovered. Whatever it was, he hoped he'd find it far from the noise and the ghosts that crowded inside houses built for two. The snow deepened with each step. The sky darkened. Echo trotted close, his warm breath steaming in the cold air. Night fell over the mountains like a heavy blanket, and Jack finally stopped beside a fallen oak tree so large it looked like a giant whose spine had snapped centuries ago. The tree's massive root system arched upward, leaving a hollow space beneath like nature's own shelter. Jack knelt and brushed away the snow, running his gloved fingers along the roots. "This is it," he whispered. The words were spoken softly, yet they held conviction. This place called to him not with comfort, but with mystery, a feeling he hadn't known since before war turned his heart into something hard and tired. He unpacked his tools, Echo guarding the surroundings with a vigilant gaze. Jack dug into the earth, his breath forming small clouds, his muscles groaning in protest. He worked through pain, through tears. He refused to let fall through the crushing weight of loneliness pressing inside his skull. He did not think he moved, and movement kept him alive. When he finally stopped, hands trembling from exhaustion, the beginnings of a home existed beneath that fallen oak. A crude shelter for a broken man and his loyal dog. But it was theirs. No memories existed here. Nothing to drown him. Nothing but the sound of Echo's steady breathing and the whisper of pine trees swaying under a winter moon. Jack sat beside a small fire and rested his hand on Echo's fur, letting warmth seep into his frozen bones. He didn't know what tomorrow would bring. But for the first time since Maggie's last breath, Jack inhaled without feeling like his chest would shatter. He stared into the flames and thought, maybe, just maybe, life wasn't finished with him yet. Snow continued to fall through the towering pines of the Rocky Mountains, soft flakes gathering over Jack Turner's shoulders as he worked tirelessly to strengthen the shelter beneath the fallen oak's massive roots. Since the night he first carved a shallow space in the earth, Jack had expanded it each day, digging deeper into the ground and reinforcing walls with thick branches he cut from surrounding fir trees. His back ached, his breath misted heavily in the frigid air, but there was purpose in his arms again, purpose he hadn't felt since before Maggie became sick. Echo, his 7-year-old German shepherd, was never more than a few steps away, ears flicked forward, muscles taut beneath his fur, as if prepared for danger to burst from the tree line at any moment. Jack admired the dog's loyalty. Echo didn't just follow, he guarded. Ever since the war, Jack had lived with the awareness of invisible eyes, sometimes real, too often imagined. Echo saw those eyes too, or sensed them, and that gave him confidence that his instincts hadn't all turned into ghosts of paranoia. Jack spent the cold daylight hours hauling rocks to build a windbreak around the entrance of the shelter. His fingers, calloused and cracked from frost, fumbled sometimes, and Echo would huff impatiently, nudging fallen stones with his nose until Jack chuckled bitterly at the dog's impatience. All right, he muttered, setting them back into place. Beneath the roots, he had created a fire pit surrounded by stones to contain heat. Smoke curled upward through cracks in the oak roots where snow had melted away, creating tiny vents that carried warmth into the frozen air. He slept curled beside Echo's warmth each night, Maggie's wedding ring in his pocket, and his father's leather journal under his arm. He thought little of the world beyond the snow, but the world had not forgotten him. People in Denver noticed his disappearance quickly, an elderly man leaving a paid-for home walking into a blizzard with his dog and a backpack. It didn't take long before rumors flew. Some said Jack had lost his mind after his wife's death, others that he had joined a cult in the mountains. More than one local newspaper, hungry for winter headlines, wrote articles painting him as a rogue survivalist, unstable and unpredictable, maybe dangerous. Jack didn't see the papers, but he could feel the narrative twisting in the wind that blew up from the city. One late morning, as the sun attempted to warm the frozen world, but failed, Echo growled low at something Jack didn't see. The dog's stance stiffened, tail straightened, his breath forming a sharp white plume. Jack froze, gripping the small hatchet at his belt. Figures emerged from behind the pine trunks, 2 men dressed in dark winter coats lined with fur boots, too clean and expensive for mountain trails, and purposeful steps that cracked the snow like a warning. They did not belong to this wilderness. The taller of the two raised a hand in greeting. His voice was smooth, professional, far too polite for the bitter cold. "Mr. Turner, isn't it?" he called. He introduced himself as Christopher Hale, a man in his mid-40s, hair neatly parted, a narrow face with cheekbones sharp enough to cut ice. His beard was trimmed close, not a single strand out of place, and his dark gray coat looked like it cost more than Jack had earned in a year. Hale's posture was perfect. He moved with confidence, not the swagger of a brute, but the certainty of someone used to winning. His companion, Mark Jeffries, looked younger, maybe early 30s, with a sturdy build and sandy blonde beard that curled slightly against his scarf. His eyes flicked constantly from Echo to the woods, revealing a man not accustomed to places where nature held all the power. Mark was security, clearly hired muscle, who had once been strong but now followed orders instead of giving them. "We represent Harrington Properties," Hale said pleasantly, as if he were offering Jack a spare cup of sugar. He extended a crisp white envelope toward Jack, who did not move to take it. Hale smiled without warmth. Our firm has recently acquired development rights for a large portion of this forest. We're looking to make a fair offer to resolve what could become overly complicated. Echo snarled, teeth bared. Mark's hand twitched toward a concealed weapon beneath his coat, before Hale subtly shook his head, signaling him to relax. Jack kept his voice low and guarded. "There's nothing here worth developing," he said. His breath came out in a visible puff. Hale's smile widened just enough to reveal amusement. "On the contrary, Mr. Turner, this specific parcel of land is very important to our client." He gently wiggled the envelope, encouraging Jack to accept it. Against his better judgment, Jack tugged off a glove and snatched it. His name was printed on the front. He opened it carefully, unfolding a document offering him $100,000 cash immediate wire transfer to vacate the area and relinquish any claim to the land. Jack blinked, his stomach dropping. They were not mistaken. They had come looking for him. They knew exactly where he stood and what ground his boots had pressed into snow. He closed the envelope slowly, meeting Hale's eyes. "I don't own this land. Why in God's name would you pay me to leave it?" Hale inhaled calmly, as if the conversation bored him. "Because we believe you may come across information suggesting otherwise." His gaze flicked briefly toward the leather journal poking from Jack's open rucksack. In that 1 second, Jack's pulse lurched. They knew. They knew about his father. They knew about the land rights. They knew far more than a company negotiating development should. "We'd like to avoid disputes," Hale continued smoothly, "especially ones involving legacy documents." Jack's jaw clenched. The wind howled through the trees like a warning. Echo stood rigid, growling deep from his chest. Hale stepped back slightly, adjusting his gloves. "Think quickly," he said. "Winter is harsh. You and your dog would be far more comfortable returning to Denver." He turned to leave Mark following, though not without giving Jack a look of irritation that lingered as long as his footprints would. "We'll be in touch." Jack didn't call after them. He didn't need to. The trees swallowed them, their black coats vanishing into white silence. But trouble had a scent, and Echo smelled it long after they were gone, pacing circles around the shelter, nails digging into the snow. That night, Echo refused to rest. His ears stayed perked, his eyes scanning every shifting shadow. Every now and then he bolted upright, barking into the dark, like he sensed movement beyond the tree line. Jack found sleep impossible. He sat feeding wood into the fire, clutching his father's journal, its cover warm beneath his palm. Inside the shelter, the journal lay open to one of the strange pages Henry had written long ago, "True North leads home," and beneath the cryptic message a sketched outline of the land around this very tree, a hidden mine entrance marked beneath the roots. Jack's heart pounded. Someone was watching him. Someone wanted him gone. Maggie once told him that when life pushes you to the edge, it's because there's something worth finding beyond the fall. As Echo growled again at the shifting night teeth flashing in the firelight, Jack felt it for the first time since her death, a spark of fight returning to his blood. There was something buried here, something his family once owned, and someone in Denver was desperate to bury it again. Jack threw another log onto the fire, eyes fixed on the dark forest beyond the flames, and whispered to Echo, "We're not leaving." Echo's answer was a low, determined growl that echoed through the cold. The wind screeched like something wounded as it whipped through the tall pines above Jack Turner's hidden shelter. Morning light crept slowly into the hollow, beneath the roots, thin slivers of gray pushing away the night. Jack hadn't slept more than an hour at a time, startled awake each moment. Echo's low growls rippled through the cold air. The dog lay now, with his head on his paws, amber eyes open, watching the darkness beyond the fire's dying glow. Jack pressed a hand to the leather journal under his arm, needing the feeling of it, something solid, something real, something his father once held with those work-scarred hands. When the sun finally rose high enough to pierce the pines, Jack knelt and opened the journal again. Pages of sketches, forged metal diagrams, and notes in Henry Turner's heavy handwriting filled the first half. But in the middle, the tone changed. The careful lines of ink grew frantic, more pressure in the strokes, sentences ending abruptly. Diagrams shifted from tools to maps, always the same area, always the same tree drawn at the center, its roots twisting like veins. The fallen oak above him. Jack's breath caught as he studied one specific page he hadn't noticed clearly before. It showed a square-shaped boundary drawn with confident precision, labeled 50 acres, Turner Claim, 1891. Beneath the title, a signature, Bernard Turner, Jack's great-grandfather. Bernard had been a silver miner, a wiry man with sharp eyes and weather-beaten skin, as Henry once described him. Tough enough to wrestle ore from the mountains and stubborn enough never to surrender what was his. According to family lore, Bernard had built a fortune once, only to lose everything after a cave-in that killed half his crew. He became a cautionary tale about luck running out. But this journal suggested something else. The land had remained in the family, legally, until suddenly, it didn't. Jack flipped pages as his heartbeat grew louder in his head. A note scribbled near the margin read, "Records vanish after 1917. No sale. No tax lien. Someone erased us." Henry's handwriting became jagged, desperate. "Watch the Harrington name. They took what we built." Jack stared at it, blood turning to ice. Harrington. The same name printed on the envelope Hale had handed him. A company that seemed inexplicably obsessed with this patch of wilderness that everyone else ignored. Someone had taken land that belonged to the Turner family and buried the truth deeper than the silver veins beneath the ground. Echo nudged Jack's elbow, breaking his trance. The dog's hackles rose and he stared toward the tree line again. Jack followed his gaze and saw movement. A woman stepped out from behind a thick cluster of evergreens, her boots crunching lightly through snow. She raised her hands in a gesture of peace. "Hello there," she called, her voice steady despite the cold. Jack's hand went instinctively to his hatchet, though he didn't lift it. Echo stood rigid, ready to defend. The woman approached slowly, her features becoming clear as she neared. She looked to be in her early 50s with a slim build that hinted she spent more time with books than outdoors. Shoulder-length auburn hair peeked from beneath a gray knit beanie, and her glasses fogged lightly with each breath. She wore a thick navy parka dusted with frost, and her cheeks were reddened by the wind. She carried a messenger bag slung over her shoulder, the strap frayed from use. "My name is Emily Carter," she said. "I work for the Denver County Records Office. More specifically, I handle historical land archives." Her eyes softened when she looked at Echo. "And that handsome boy must be your protector." Jack didn't smile. "What do you want?" he asked bluntly. Emily paused a moment, measuring him, perhaps understanding he wasn't a man to be rushed. "There have been irregularities in certain property files that recently came to my attention," she explained, "particularly involving the Turner family." She pulled out a folder from her bag, clutching it with gloved hands. Inside were photocopies, grainy but legible, of documents Jack instantly recognized Bernard Turner's original 1891 mining claim. Property tax receipts recorded each year until 1917. Then a gap wide enough to swallow a century. Emily took a careful step closer. "Your father requested these records years ago. I found his written requests archived in an internal log, but the responses were missing." Her voice dropped lower. "That's not supposed to happen." Jack inhaled sharply. Henry had known, and someone had made sure the truth stayed buried. Emily's expression darkened. The Harrington family purchased nearly the entire surrounding region between 1920 and 1950. Yet there is no legitimate record of them acquiring the Turner claim. None. It simply disappears from the ledger and reappears under Harrington's name decades later as historically transferred. A phrase that usually means someone forged paperwork when no one was watching. Ooh. Jack clenched his fist around the journal's edge. Betrayal had bled into generations of Turner lives. The war, Maggie's illness, he had survived both. But a different battle was rising before him now, one he had inherited without knowing. Emily knelt, placing the documents gently onto a flat rock near the fire. "I believe your family was robbed," she said, "and I think they're trying to do it again. Why else would Harrington Properties send men here to negotiate with a man they claim has no rights to this land?" Jack stared at her, measuring her sincerity. She seemed nervous, shifting her weight, chewing lightly at her lip, as she waited for his answer. She was not a corporate mouthpiece. She was a woman who loved the truth too much to let it rot in a locked cabinet. "Why come all the way out here?" Jack asked at last. Emily pushed her glasses up her nose. "Because if I requested these documents officially, they might disappear again. I had to take matters into my own hands." Echo sniffed her boot's tail, flicking once his silent approval granted with cautious trust. Jack's shoulders eased slightly. Emily opened another paper, this one older, handwritten. A rough blueprint of a mine shaft, tunnels leading underground beneath the oak tree. The silver vein. A note beneath read, "Entrance sealed after collapse. Bernard survived. Others did not." Jack's breath turned ragged. He looked at Emily silently, pleading for a lie, a misunderstanding. But she held his gaze firmly. "Your great-grandfather didn't lose the mine," she whispered. "Someone took it." Tension thickened the air. Jack glanced toward the roots above him, those enormous wooden claws gripping earth as if guarding a secret. He had thought this oak was a miracle of nature. But maybe fate had dragged him here precisely where he needed to be. Emily straightened, brushing frost from her coat. "I want to help you uncover what happened, and I want to protect what remains." She hesitated, then added, "But you are not safe here. Harrington won't walk away. They believe something under this ground is still valuable." Echo growled softly toward the woods again. Emily shivered, eyes darting where the dog stared. "We should keep this quiet," she murmured. "If they knew I gave you these documents." A sudden snap of a branch echoed sharply through the forest. All three turned. The trees fell still again, silent like hunters waiting. Emily swallowed her fear and stepped back. "I'll return." Soon she whispered urgently, "Keep that journal close. It might be the only proof left that your family ever existed out here." Before Jack could respond, she disappeared into the woods with surprising speed for someone more at home in archives than mountains. Jack watched her vanish. Echo remained tense long after she was gone, his gaze fixed on invisible threats. Jack pressed the journal against his chest, heart racing. The truth wasn't just ink on paper. It was buried somewhere beneath his feet, beneath the roots of his new home, beneath the lies of the Harrington Empire. And now that he knew they would come for him, Jack stared down at the map of the mined fingers, trembling with purpose. Echo rested his head against Jack's knee, a living reminder that he wasn't alone, not this time. The snow fell harder as evening approached. Jack grabbed a shovel. If his family's history had been buried here, then he would unearth it with his own hands. Night dropped hard over the Rockies, a black curtain whipped by shrieking winds. Snowflakes stung Jack Turner's face like shards of ice as he worked frantically to cover the mine entrance he had begun to expose. His shovel scraped metal not an hour earlier, and beneath layers of frozen soil, He uncovered the rusted hinge of a sealed hatch, real proof that something valuable and hidden lay underground. But there was no time left to investigate. Not tonight. Echo's growls had begun long before the storm rolled in low rumblings vibrating through his ribs. The dog paced and stared toward the trees as if someone was approaching step by calculated step. Jack swept his gloved hand over the map Emily Carter had delivered, the old blueprint showing silver veins spiraling deep beneath the oak roots. He shoved it into a waterproof pouch, along with the copies of land ownership papers. His father's journal was already tucked against his chest, inside his coat. Every instinct in his body screamed that danger was coming fast. He grabbed a small satchel of essentials food matches, his army knife, and strapped it to his back. Echo suddenly barked with explosive fury. The hair along his spine rose as he lunged toward the darkness. Jack hissed a command under his breath, but he didn't need the warning, he heard it too. Footsteps crunching across snow. Slow. Heavy. Too deliberate to belong to an animal. Jack doused the fire with his boot, plunging their shelter into icy black. His heart hammered like a drum in his throat as he pressed his back against the oak, using the shadows as cover. Echo crouched low beside him, muscles coiled. A flashlight beam sliced through the trees. Two figures appeared, silhouettes shifting like predators through storm-swallowed night. Jack recognized one immediately, Mark Jeffries, broader-shouldered now under a tactical winter jacket. His blonde beard iced over, jaw clenched in sharp fury. His posture screamed military, past eyes cold, scanning for targets. He carried a high-powered rifle, not concealed this time, but dangling openly from a strap across his chest. The man beside him was unfamiliar. Travis Boone, mid-30s and built like a wall of meat with a thick neck and shaved head that caught the flashlight's glare. A jagged scar cut down his left cheek, puckered and angry, an old wound that seemed to define his entire presence. Boone's eyes were tiny and mean, flicking around like a wild animal's, but with the calculated cruelty of a human who had enjoyed hurting others once, maybe too many times. He moved like a brawler, heavy boots, heavy breathing, but deadly patience. Mark spat words through the wind. "Orders are clear. Grab him. Grab the dog. Take what he's holding." Jack felt bile rise. So that was it. Harrington wasn't just threatening anymore. They were hunting. Echo lunged first. His furious bark ricocheted off frozen branches, drawing the men's attention. A gunshot cracked through the storm, loud enough to shake the snow loose from branches above. Echo darted into the darkness before another bullet could fly. Jack sprinted in the opposite direction, boots slipping on packed snow. A burning sting tore through his shoulder. He stumbled, gritting his teeth to keep from screaming. Warm blood seeped into the fabric of his coat. Not stopping. Not yet. He crashed through branches and briars, letting the blizzard mask his tracks. Echo reappeared ahead, fast, agile, panting steam, his eyes blazing with fear and determination. Jack reached out with his uninjured arm, fingers brushing Echo's side for reassurance. He could barely hear his own thoughts over the storm and the pounding in his skull. But one truth stood above everything: he would not let them bury the Turner legacy again. Behind them, Mark cursed. "He's bleeding," he shouted. "Follow the trail." Jack pushed harder, lungs burning. His legs felt sluggish, heavy as lead pipes. He prayed for adrenaline to last longer than blood. Echo paused ahead, sniffing rapidly. The dog nudged Jack toward a narrow ravine hidden beneath wind-carved snowdrifts. Without question, Jack followed, sliding down the icy slope and landing hard in the frozen creek bed below. Pain exploded up his side, and he bit down on his lip until he tasted iron. Echo jumped down effortlessly beside him, then turned and pressed against Jack's leg, as if to urge him deeper into the gorge. The storm swallowed sound, but not completely. The crunch of approaching boots echoed above, faint but getting stronger. Jack forced himself up, stumbling as he followed the ravine's twisting path through the dark. His breath hitched each time the cold air clawed the wound in his shoulder. Maggie's voice echoed in his mind, soft and steady. "Moving, Jack. Keep surviving." He didn't know how long they ran. The blizzard distorted time into a blur. But eventually, the ravine split into a small clearing where snow-laden bushes huddled close against the cliffs. Echo's ears perked. He sprinted forward, digging frantically at a narrow space beneath a boulder, a gap just large enough for the two of them to squeeze through. Jack dropped to his knees, ignoring the blaze of pain as he crawled into darkness. Echo slipped in beside him, tail curling against Jack's thigh. They held still, breath shallow as footsteps approached the ravine. Voices echoed faintly. "That idiot can't get far," Boone grumbled, voice low and gravelly. "He's an old man." Mark responded sharply, like ice snapping. "Don't underestimate him, he's a soldier." Boone scoffed. "He's a ghost soon enough." Jack pressed his hand into Echo's fur to keep him silent. The dog trembled, not in fear, but fury, waiting for release. The footsteps finally faded, swallowed again by the howling wind. Jack sagged against the rock wall, breathing hard. His shoulder pulsed wildly beneath his coat. He felt lightheaded, the injury demanding attention he didn't have the luxury to give. He whispered into Echo's ear, "Good boy. You saved us again." Echo licked Jack's cold knuckles, a silent vow. He would not lose Jack the way Jack had lost everyone else. When the wind finally eased, Jack peeked out. The ravine lay empty. But Harrington's men were out there, and they were not finished. He knew fear could paralyze a man, or sharpen him. Tonight, it ignited something in him that he thought war had extinguished forever, the instinct to fight for what mattered. He clenched the pouch with the land deeds and the mind map tight under his arm. His blood dripped hot against his freezing fingertips. Jack lifted his gaze toward the direction of civilization, the faint orange glow of Denver's distant lights, barely visible through swirling snow. He could not stay hidden forever, and he could not face Harrington's army alone. He needed help. He needed Emily. He needed to take this fight to the world where truth could burn brighter than any silver vein. Jack stood wincing at the pain that radiated from the bullet lodged in his shoulder. Echo rose with him, tail stiff, ready to move. Together, step by agonizing step, they left the shelter and headed toward the light, toward justice or hell, whichever came first. Behind them, the snow buried their footsteps as fast as they could make them. Daylight in Denver felt unreal after the storm, too bright, too ordinary for the chaos Jack Turner carried in his veins. Snow melted into gray slush along the sidewalks as he limped through the city streets with Echo pressed tightly at his side. Every step sent a spike of pain through his shoulder, bandaged roughly with fabric torn from his inner coat. Blood still seeped beneath the patch, but the documents he carried mattered more than his wound. The waterproof pouch was clutched against his chest, like his last heartbeat records of a stolen mine, a missing land claim, and the words of the dead that refused to stay buried. He didn't call ahead or warn anyone. He simply marched into the Denver County Records Office, boots tracking dirt and melted snow onto the polished floor. Fluorescent lights buzzed overhead. A long counter divided the lobby behind which clerks typed and sorted papers. People turned and stared, some concerned, some curious, a few frightened of the scruffy old man, with blood on his sleeve, and a fierce German shepherd that looked prepared to take down anyone who dared approach too quickly. Emily Carter was in the middle of shelving new files when she saw him. Her auburn hair was pinned back in a loose bun, and dark circles smudged the skin under her kind hazel eyes. She looked smaller indoors, wrapped in a brown cardigan, instead of her cold-weather gear, but the resolve on her face sharpened instantly. She rushed toward him with a gasp. "Jack." "My God, what happened?" Not here, Jack said through clenched teeth. They're coming. Harrington's men. We need to go somewhere safe, somewhere we can speak publicly and make this undeniable. Emily swallowed deeply and nodded. I know who can help. She guided him outside where a dark blue SUV sat idling with the heater humming. The man behind the wheel looked up as they approached Michael Reyes, a Denver police sergeant in his mid-40s. He had a square jaw shadowed by coarse stubble, short black hair streaked faintly with gray, and a thick winter jacket that emphasized his broad build. His eyes were sharp yet calm, the kind that had seen too many bad nights, but still believed in mornings. He stepped out, boots hitting the pavement with authority. Emily told me everything she'd found, Reyes said, offering his hand. But I wasn't prepared for a man barging into the lobby like he just escaped World War III. Jack didn't take the hand. He was too busy gripping the pouch, but he gave a nod. You'd better believe it, officer. They shot me for this. He tapped the pouch. They'll do worse if we let them. Echo sniffed the officer's boots, analyzing him. Reyes crouched and extended a cautious hand. Hello, boy. Looks like you've been working harder than most officers I know. Echo gave a single approving chuff and allowed a quick scratch behind the ears. Reyes guided them into the SUV. Jack sank into the seat with a groan as Emily clipped on Echo's safety harness. The wheels spun through slick roads heading toward a destination Jack didn't recognize. Emily kept glancing back, checking Jack's bandage worry etched across her face. That needs real treatment, she whispered. Later he muttered, truth first, healing after. They arrived at the Denver police headquarters, a towering concrete structure with glass doors reflecting the winter sun. As soon as Jack stepped inside, chaos ignited. Officers rushed over with questions, paramedics moved forward with stretchers, and camera flashes erupted. Reporters who had camped out for unrelated stories now alerted by urgent whispers spreading like wildfire. Reyes raised both hands and barked, "Step aside. We have critical evidence coming through." Jack was led into a secure briefing room. Emily remained by his side, gripping the documents like sacred scripture. Paramedics cut away his blood-soaked sleeve and cleaned the wound, and though Jack hissed in pain, he never loosened the arm holding the journal. Cameras pointed at him through glass separating the press corridor. Every lens stared as if searching for the truth inside his battered body. Reyes addressed the reporters once the room was staged. His voice boomed with authority. This man is Jack Turner, a decorated war veteran and rightful descendant of the Turner mining family. We have uncovered strong evidence of historical land theft committed by the powerful Harrington family over 100 years ago. Records were altered, files were destroyed. A silver mine and over 50 acres of land were taken illegally. Today, the truth begins to rise. Jack opened the pouch. Every paper, every torn record, every page of Henry's journal, every blueprint, he laid all of it on the table, hands, shaking not from weakness, but from the magnitude of this moment. Emily added the rest, the archived photocopies, the missing file requests, the timeline of erased ownership. Journalists took notes rapidly. Officers stared in disbelief. Jack stood with slow, painful movement. He placed a hand over the journal and spoke, voice rough but determined. My family mined silver here before any Harrington set foot in Colorado. Men died for that mine. My great-grandfather built something worth protecting, and they stole it from him. From all of us. Flashbulbs brightened like bursts of lightning. Echo sat at his feet, head high, as if guarding a monument instead of a man. Within hours, a warrant was issued for Harrington properties. The Colorado Attorney General ordered a full investigation. Charles Harrington himself, once an untouchable titan of the mining and real estate empires, was placed under formal inquiry. Arrests followed. Mark Jeffries and Travis Boone were detained attempting to flee the state. Assets of Harrington properties were frozen by court order. For the first time in his life, Jack realized what justice could feel like. Not a roar of victory, but the quiet lifting of weight that had been crushing generations of Turners. 2 weeks later, Jack stood in the Denver courthouse dressed in a clean winter coat Emily had insisted he wear. His shoulder was healing, and though the scar would remain, it felt like a mark of survival rather than loss. The courtroom smelled of polished wood and old law books. The judge, a stern woman with silver hair and a voice like cold stone, reviewed the final evidence and delivered the ruling. The rights to the 50-acre Turner claim are hereby restored to Mr. Jack Turner. Harrington Properties' ownership is nullified pending criminal proceedings. Jack closed his eyes. Echo nudged his leg. Emily squeezed his good shoulder, and a tear, just one, escaped down Jack's weathered cheek. After the hearing, reporters swarmed microphones thrust forward demanding statements. Jack offered only a nod toward Echo. "He's the hero," he said simply. "Justice didn't resurrect the dead. It didn't erase pain, but it gave the future back its shape." Later, under the twilight glow of the mountains, Jack and Echo returned to the fallen oak, their home, their claim, their history. Jack built a new fire and watched its sparks rise into the cold blue sky. Snowflakes fell gently, harmless for now. Echo curled beside him, eyes half closed, tail brushing softly against Jack's boots. Jack stared at the roots above, imagining the silver veins running like blood beneath the ground. He whispered into the crackling night voice, soft but sure. "War took so much from us, but this place gave something back." Echo's ear twitched. Jack smiled. For the first time in years, tomorrow felt like a gift waiting to be unwrapped. And beneath the frozen earth, the truth finally breathed free again. At the end of his long journey, Jack Turner understood something that had always lived quietly beneath the noise of life. Sometimes God's miracles arrive disguised as heartbreak. When everything seemed lost, his home, his family, his strength, God placed a loyal dog in his path, a fallen oak to shelter him, and the truth hidden beneath the frozen earth. It was never chance. It was grace, subtle, patient, waiting to be uncovered by a heart that refuses to surrender. In everyday life, miracles rarely roar. They whisper. They show up in the friends who stay, in the strangers who help us rise again, in the doors that open after every slammed shut. And even in the coldest seasons of the soul, God's light keeps burning, sometimes in a fireplace beneath old roots, sometimes in the eyes of a faithful companion. For everyone watching this story, may God protect you, guide you, and remind you that your own miracle might be just one step deeper beneath the snow. If this story touched your heart, help it travel further, like share and comment where you're watching from. And if you believe loyal hearts and divine grace can change the world, subscribe so you won't miss the next story of hope. May God bless you and your family tonight and always.